Tinker versus Des Moines Independent Community School District, an educational program planned and developed by the Historical Society of the District of Columbia Circuit, with video produced by the Federal Judicial Center, December 14, 2017. Nicholas Sansone sets the stage, followed by Robert Niles and Mary Beth Tinker, who discuss the events that led Tinker to the Supreme Court. The featured portion of this program is a reenactment, led by Zion Sadiq, arguing as petitioner Tinker, and Nicholas Sansone, arguing as the respondent school district, with Judges David S. Tatel and Sri Srinivasan of the United States Court of Appeals for the District of Columbia Circuit, and Judge Ketanji Brown Jackson of the United States District Court for the District of Columbia presiding. A question and answer portion of the program is conducted by Amy Lashinsky.
Hello, everybody, and welcome to today's program. We're so glad that you could all be here with us today. Now, just a quick word about today's program. Today, as you probably already know, you're going to see a reenactment of a court case that was originally argued about 50 years ago, back in 1968. So as you know, the law tells us what we can and can't do, but it also tells governmental entities, such as public schools, what they can and can't do. So the case we're looking at today was brought by several students who believed that their school had violated the law, specifically the First Amendment of the United States Constitution, by restricting the students' right to express themselves freely. The students lost in the court where they first filed suit, so they appealed to a higher court, arguing that the first court was wrong. In this second higher court, a group of 8 judges heard the case and split evenly, 4 judges agreeing with the students and 4 judges agreeing with the school. Because there was a tied vote, the first court's ruling in favor of the school board remained in place. So the students asked the Supreme Court, the country's highest court, to hear their case. The Supreme Court agreed to hear the case, and today you're going to be hearing the arguments the lawyers for both sides made when they appeared at the Supreme Court. 3 of our judges will be playing the roles of the Supreme Court justices who heard the case back in 1968. My friend Zion, over there, and myself, Nick, will be playing the roles of the lawyers. Zion and I work for one of the judges you will meet later today, as do our 2 friends, Amy and Robert. You'll hear from Amy and Robert today as well. But before we do the reenactment, it's important for you to have some context about what the case is all about and how it ended up at the Supreme Court. So we are very lucky today to have with us Mary Beth Tinker. One of the students who initiated the lawsuit will be studying today. So my friend Robert is going to speak with Mary Beth a little bit about the events that started her on the path to the U.S. Supreme Court. So let's go ahead and welcome them.
Here. Wow, you all look great. What a place and what a program.
So Mary Beth, thanks so much for coming in today.
Oh, it's great to be here with all of these wonderful students, teachers, judges, and you, Robert. Thank you for having me here today.
Thank you. So in a few minutes, we're going to see a reenactment of a Supreme Court case. And that case is called Tinker versus Des Moines.
That's pretty funny right there.
That's you. You are Mary Beth Tinker. So why don't you tell us what exactly you did 50 years ago that got this all started?
I was growing up in mighty times, just like now. Does anybody think we have mighty times going on right now? Yeah, come on, let's hear it. All right. I knew you would. It was mighty times like now. And I saw some kids on TV one day that were so amazing. They were in Birmingham, Alabama. And they were marching and singing songs like I was singing earlier. This little light of mine, I'm gonna let it shine. And they were standing up for what? Racial equality, racial justice, right? Yeah. Martin Luther King was in jail already, writing his famous letter from Birmingham jail. But the kids said, that's okay, Martin, we've got you covered. We're going to march and sing and stand up for justice. And so I saw them on TV, and they were so amazing because the police put dogs on them. And the fire department put fire hoses on it. Who's seen these photos? Yeah. The photos went viral all over the world. And they went to our living room up in Iowa where I was growing up, and they inspired us to also speak up and stand up for things that we cared about in democracy, and for love and brotherhood, and those values that we learned in church where my father was a minister. He was a Methodist preacher. Our teachers taught us about democracy, and my father taught us about values, and my mother, and so many others. So in 1965, then we saw the Vietnam War building up, and on TV. It's really a story of journalism, how wonderful journalists are, and bringing us these stories. Otherwise, how would we know what was going on in the world? So in 1965, on the news, we saw the Vietnam War building up, and it was so sad, and there were children that were running from their burning huts in Vietnam, and soldiers lying in body bags. It was really sad. We were already sad about Birmingham, but now we were getting really sad about the Vietnam War. And so we didn't know what to do. It's like a 7th grader told me recently. She said, I see the news and I feel so sad sometimes. And I know some of you feel that way. But she said, I don't know what to do. That's how we felt. Some students in Des Moines had an idea. What if we wear black armbands to school to mourn for the dead in Vietnam? Because after the Birmingham kids marched in Birmingham, the Ku Klux Klan did something to punish them. You know the Ku Klux Klan? Yeah, they're terrorists. They're white supremacists. And they're still around. The Ku Klux Klan, to punish the children who marched in Birmingham, put a bomb in their church right on Sunday morning, knowing the kids would be in church. And the bodies of 4 little girls were found in the church. They were about the same age as me and my sisters. They were 11 to 14 years old. And a man named James Baldwin, you know James Baldwin? Yeah, he's a great writer. And a man named Bayard Rustin, they wrote a letter and said, what we should do to mourn for the children who were killed by the Ku Klux Klan, we should wear black armbands. And that's what they had done in 1963 when the girls were killed in Birmingham. By the way, the lawyer that went after the Ku Klux Klan for that just got elected to the Senate in Alabama. Yeah. Wow. History still is with us. It's still with us, all of these things. So anyway, back to the story. In 1965, then, we were getting really sad about the Vietnam War, so some of the kids in Des Moines said, what if we wear black armbands to mourn for the dead in Vietnam? Because we had a memorial service in Des Moines for the little girls. And so that's what we decided to do, but it was just like this. And by the way, the armband is over at the museum. Isn't that crazy? We had no idea this was going to turn out to be such a big deal. But the principals made a rule against armbands. And they said anybody wearing an armband is going to be suspended. Oh, that made me really scared. I was really nervous, and I went off to school, and I was so nervous and everything. And when they sent me down to the principal's office and said, now, Mary Beth, take off that armband, I looked around the office, and I looked at Mrs. Tarman, and I said, okay, here you go. I took off that armband. I was so scared, and I was so nervous. That's when I found out something, Robert. You can make a big difference in the world, even if you're scared, even if you're nervous, even if you don't know it's going to turn out to be a big deal. And Mrs. Tarman said, well, you're going to be suspended for doing that. And I've got my suspension notice in here. I'll have to show it to you later. And she said, yeah, maybe it's here. So Mrs. Tarman said, you're going to be suspended for doing that. Here it is, right here. I found this in a box a few months ago. Always keep your suspension notice, kids. Just never know. Mrs. Tarman sent me home, and I was so scared. The next day, my brother John got suspended, and a boy named Chris Eckhart also got suspended. 5 kids got suspended. And all these mean people started coming out, the haters. And they sent us hate mail like this one. Here's a postcard we got. It says hate. Yeah, the haters. They're out there, right, kids? Yeah, they threatened to bomb our house and things. But a group called the American Civil Liberties Union, they said, we're going to help these kids because that's not right. They should have their rights too. That's the American Civil Liberties Union. That's what they do, the ACLU. And they came and started helping us, and they said, we're going to have to always try to negotiate if there's a disagreement. So we did. And you should do that today, too, if you disagree with something. Try to work it out. So we went to the school board. We tried to change their mind, but they wouldn't change their mind. So we had to, okay, there's 3 branches of government, right? Tell me the 3 branches. Legislative, executive, judicial. Which branch are we at today? Judicial. Thanks, judicial branch. Thanks to the judicial branch, yeah. Where's our judges? Thank you, Thank you, Justice Tatel, and so many others. Okay, so anyway, the ACLU said, we're going to have to go over here to the other branch of government, the judicial. So that's what they did. And they took it to court, and we lost. And we lost at the appeals court. And I thought, of course we're going to lose. No big important judge is going to say kids have rights. But then it was appealed to the Supreme Court, and amazingly, by this time, when we started, I was in 8th grade. Who's in 8th grade? Got any 8th grade? Yeah, just like you all. When I started, I was in 8th grade. Then, by the time we won, I was in 11th grade, and I couldn't believe the Supreme Court, with people like Abe Fortas, William Brennan, Thurgood Marshall, Justice White, voting that actually students do have rights in the public schools, and when students enter the gate of the public school, they do not lose their rights, and neither do teachers. And they said one of my favorite things in the ruling, which is that students are persons. Yeah, that's kind of good, right? You like that, guys? Come on, let's hear it. All right, you are persons with rights and responsibilities of persons, and they said there are 2 things you cannot do in the public schools. Number 1, disrupt school, substantially disrupt school. They said that's still not allowed. Yes, you have your right to free speech, cannot substantially disrupt, and cannot impinge on the rights of others, whatever that means. And that's been debated ever since, probably why this ruling has been cited over 6,000 times, the last time I checked, in student speech cases. So I'm a nurse. I went on in my life. I had no idea that this was going to be such a big deal. I became a nurse. I worked mostly with kids. I was working last at Prince George's Hospital with teenagers. Yeah, who's from Prince George's? Yeah, all right, Prince George's. And I said, you know what, a few years ago, I said, I'm going to leave the hospital, and I'm going to start traveling around and talking to kids about their rights and how they should stand up for their rights, because I said kids aren't getting a good deal in our society. Like right now, I have a red ribbon that I'm wearing that was given to me over at American University by some teenagers a couple of weeks ago. Yeah, where's the Students from School Without Walls? Yeah, thank you. Thank you for coming, and thank you for giving me the ribbon. This is to honor Yuseli, who was a student at Cap City Charter School, and he was killed about a month or so ago. And I'm mourning right now today also for a student at Wilson High School, Jamari, who was killed last summer by gun violence. Students are standing up about all of these things, and about racial justice, and about peace, and about the environment, and about school lunches. I know you all want, but you said you wanted school lunches. That's what you all are standing up about. And so many things. I listen to students all over the country who are speaking up and standing up and using their First Amendment rights. So that's what happened, Robert, and that's what brought me here today. And thank you for having me here today. Thank you to all of you.
I think we're good. Thank you. And now we're going to move on to the reenactment. Thank you, Mary Beth.
Okay, thanks a lot, Robert.
All right. Thank you, Mary Beth, and thank you, Robert. So later in the program, you'll have the opportunity to ask Mary Beth any questions you might have about her experience. For now, though, now that you know a little bit about the nature of the conflict between the students and the school district, we're ready to present you with the actual arguments that took place at the Supreme Court in Mary Beth's case. We've trimmed it down a little bit somewhat for the sake of time. To participate in our reenactment, we have 3 federal judges joining us, Judge Tatel, Judge Srinivasan, and Judge Jackson. To become judges, all 3 of them were selected by the president and approved by the Senate, so they're very well-respected people, and we're very lucky to have them with us today. So just a couple words about each of them. Judge Tatel was appointed to the D.C. Circuit Court of Appeals, that's the federal appeals court, by President Bill Clinton in 1994. Before becoming a judge, he worked at a law firm, a number of nonprofit organizations, and the government, and he focused most heavily on education issues and civil rights. Judge Srinivasan was appointed to the same court, the D.C. Circuit, by President Obama in 2013. Before becoming a judge, he worked for law firms and the government, and in these roles, he argued 25 cases before the Supreme Court. And Judge Jackson was appointed to the District Court for D.C., that's the federal trial court here in D.C., by President Obama in 2013. Before becoming a judge, she worked for both law firms and for the government, and she served on the United States Sentencing Commission, which is a body that gives guidance to judges on how much they should punish people for certain crimes. So later in the program, we'll have time for you to ask the judges any questions you have for them. But for now, let's turn to the mock oral argument for Tinker versus Des Moines. As you listen, I want you to notice how the judges are trying to figure out what rules should apply in the schools when it comes to freedom of speech and expression. And after the arguments, my friend Amy will be asking you some questions about what you think the rules ought to be. So with that, I'm going to turn this over to Bryant, one of our marshals, who's going to call the courtroom to order.
All rise. All those having business before the Honorable David S. Tatel and the Honorable Sri Srinivasan, Circuit Judges of the United States Court of Appeals in and for the District of Columbia, and the Honorable Ketanji B. Jackson, Judge of the United States District Court in and for the District of Columbia, now hearing the proceedings of Tinker versus Des Moines Independent Community School District will draw nigh and give their attention. God save the United States of America and this honorable court. Please be seated. This honorable court is now in session.
Morning. We'll begin by hearing from petitioner, Mr. Siddiq.
Mr. Chief Justice, and may it please the court, this case is here on appeal from the United States Circuit Court of Appeals for the 8th Circuit. The case involves the right of public school students to express their opinions in a non-disruptive way